The FTC versus Activision Blizzard trial has come to an end. After almost 3 hours worth of closing arguments, did we just get a hint as to who will come out on top? Find out. Up next. What up guys, this is Kalo and I'm here to give you the lowdown on all things gaming, and if you're new here, feel free to subscribe to this channel for weekly video game news content, drop a like on the video, and welcome to the Level Up. Now, before we get into today's video, I want to shed some light on the fact we will be providing some basic facts from closing arguments. I also want to give my own personal opinion on this matter, just to separate the two. But first, let's break down the trial's biggest points, and up first is exclusivity. I think by now, everyone's tired of hearing this argument over the exclusivity of Call of Duty. I also think we all know that Microsoft is fully committed to shipping Call of Duty on PlayStation platforms, as Phil Spencer said under oath. According to the FTC though, those contracts that Microsoft has extended are pretty much meaningless. And their job as a government agency is not to analyze contracts, but find loopholes. Microsoft replied to this by saying the FTC could have raised its concerns to them and they could have worked together to figure something out, but the FTC offered nothing in return. Judge Corley picked up on this matter and said PlayStation does exclusivity. And beyond Call of Duty, why is Activision Blizzard different from what Sony does? She also pointed out Sony and Nintendo have far more exclusives than Xbox does. And the FTC agreed on this, and they said it's undisputable. So, what the heck are we here for? But the FTC pushed this narrative that PlayStation users will jump ship to Xbox platforms over these exclusive skins. But again, Sony already does this. Judge Corley didn't buy this again one bit, and referred back to Microsoft's Dr. Bailey and talked about hours played for Call of Duty on PlayStation. She talked about the FTC's 20% conversion rate and how this doesn't take into account playtime, as Dr. Bailey pointed out. I believe her exact quote was, "Don't tell me Call of Duty players who only play Call of Duty on PlayStation for 5 hours would switch to Xbox because of exclusivity." Judge Corley also noted if the 20% conversion rate drops to 15%, then Call of Duty exclusivity becomes unprofitable for Xbox. And again, the FTC could not give a clear reason behind this 20% number. Now let's move on to that neat little thing called the high-end console market definition ordeal. Basically, the FTC is trying to split the market between a high-end and low-end market, with PlayStation Xbox being on the top, Nintendo in their own little world, and PC gaming somewhere in the ether, and then subscription and cloud-based gaming. In terms of the PC market, Judge Corley yet again referred to Dr. Bailey, when she said a good amount of console gamers own a PC that can play games, calling them, quote, multi-home users. Now, in regards to the Switch, the judge cut off the FTC by saying, quote, "The Switch isn't the same as other consoles. You can connect it to your TV and take it with you on the go." This is again hinting at the fact that the Switch in some cases, aside from having a similar library of games, has more upside in general. So how could the FTC separate it from the PS5 and Xbox Series X? And by the way things look, they're doing this based off the sheer power of the console. Now on to good old Xbox Game Pass. Judge Corley, oddly enough, seems to be a big fan of Game Pass, alluding to the fact it's good for consumers. But the FTC claims it would take away from PlayStation's user base, but Judge Corley said, quote, "I don't understand why Sony doesn't offer day-and-date games too. And doesn't this promote competition? Wouldn't this pretty much incentivize Sony to up their subscription services and push their own games closer to their release date?" And that's pretty much the big difference between Game Pass and PlayStation Plus. While I must admit, PlayStation Plus has a pretty damn good library of games at the moment. But the reason why Game Pass is viewed as the best deal in gaming is because they offer up games on day one at a fairly low price. And above all the other points raised here, I think this is the one she nailed the most. And finally, let's move on to cloud gaming. I'm honestly with most people where you can't predict where cloud gaming will go. As stated throughout this case, it only makes up 1% of the gaming market, and to bank on such a mystery in the future is a very big risk. And this is the one area that seemed to concern Judge Corley the most. But she didn't agree with everything the FTC brought up. The FTC argued Microsoft is setting its own market on their own terms, by selecting companies like Nvidia and Ubisoft and refusing contracts with Google and Amazon. And I gotta admit, that's a good point the FTC brought up. Judge Corley brought up the fact that Activision Blizzard content wouldn't be coming to those platforms without Microsoft, basically saying some contracts are better than none. Honestly, to consolidate everything, this is the one focal point to watch out for, that could potentially lose the case for Microsoft. Now to move on to what I think, and I want to say right now, nothing is set in stone. Some of the points brought up by the judge, like how she corrected the FTC by saying, quote, "The harm to Sony is not what we care about. We care about the harm to consumers." And for this whole time, it's been quite clear the FTC's arguments are not based around consumers, rather protecting the market leader in Sony. Next up, when Judge Corley said, quote, "The FTC already won in many ways because you got Microsoft to sign a deal." So what I took away from all this was the judge was alluding to the fact the FTC already got what it wanted and the injunction isn't needed. And finally, while talking about public equity, the FTC argued harm will be done immediately if the injunction isn't granted, because Sony doesn't have a contract with Microsoft for Call of Duty. But this isn't true, because Sony already has a contract in place that guarantees this year's Call of Duty will release on PlayStation. Judge Corley said, quote, "So Call of Duty will release on PlayStation this November. Your August hearing can go forward. Nothing is going to happen." In other words, there is no immediate and irreparable harm that would call for an injunction. To me, the FTC has lost seemingly at every turn. And the arguments raised do have some concerns, but that's nothing that some talks or contract negotiations can iron out. And in closing, I feel the FTC will be denied this week. But with all that being said, I'm gonna pass this question off to you guys. Do you think cloud gaming is what gets this all shut down? Personally, I don't think it's that big of a snag to hold this all up, but crazier things have happened. Also, like I just said, I do think the FTC gets denied. But that about does it here. I've been K-Lo. I gave you the lowdown on all things gaming, and if you're new here, feel free to subscribe to this channel for weekly video game news content. Drop a like on the video, and this has been the Level Up.